Hi everyone, today we will learn how to use Stripe Web Elements to create your own checkout page. So what is Stripe Web Elements? Stripe Web Elements are basically some components pre-built by Stripe that can be used to create your own custom checkout page. In one of my previous video, I've shown you how to implement Stripe hosted checkout page, and one of the limitation of that solution is that you have very less customization option. But with Stripe Web Elements, you have more control over the UI, especially if you want to have your own branded look. Also, you might have seen something like Stripe Embedded Elements. As far as I understand, Stripe Web Elements and Embedded Elements are the same thing. So just a recap of how it will work. So your Next.js server will send all the price details to Stripe, basically how much you are going to charge from the customer and the currency. Then Stripe will create a payment intent. The payment intent is actually an object, and that object will be sent to your Next.js server. That payment intent has a secret code, and the Next.js server will send that secret code to your website, and then your website should be able to use those web elements, the components from Stripe, and then you have your own custom checkout page. So let's see that in action. But before that, please consider like and subscribe to my channel. It really helps me a lot. I have a file called createPaymentIntent.js, and also I have added the use server directive to make the function server action. So this create payment intent function has an object as a parameter where we will have an amount. This is the amount we are going to charge from the customer. Now let's just call the create function in the payment intents. We will use the Stripe instance, then payment intents.create, and we need to pass an object. Here we can specify the currency, amount, then automatic payment methods enabled to true. This will return us the payment intents object, and then we can just return the client secret. We can also wrap this in a try catch block. We will just do a console log, and then we can just return empty object. Now we need to set up the UI. So I have a page. It's called Elements. So let's go to that route. Now first, let's just create a state for storing our client secret. Now let's add a use effect so that we can call the server action. Let's create a function fetch client secret. Here we will call the create payment intent function. Let's store the result. If the client secret exists, we're gonna set the value to the state. And then just finally we'll call the fetch client secret. Now let's get the total amount. So const total price. We're just using the simple reduce function to add up all the price. Now I will render the product list. If you haven't seen any of my videos, the product list component is basically render the components, and it accepts a child. And inside this product list component as a child, we will render our web elements. To display the web elements, you need to use the elements component. This will come from React Stripe. So elements, and you need to provide the Stripe promise. The Stripe promise is coming from here using the load Stripe and the publishable key. And then we need to pass the client secret. And as a child of the elements, we can render our checkout form. I have a component called checkout form, which is totally empty. So let's just render that over here. And let's just return null for now. We have an error, invalid value for elements. Client secret should be a client secret of the form. I guess the error is over here. We are rendering the elements before Stripe promise or client secret is loaded. So we need to make sure both of them are loaded correctly. And then we will render the elements component. So if client secret and Stripe promise is loaded, only then we will render the elements. This should fix the problem. Okay, so as you can see, we don't have any problem. Now we can render the Stripe elements in the checkout form. So let's just remove the null and add a form. And inside the form, we will render a component called payment intent. Sorry, not payment intent, payment element. And as you can see, now we have our payment options like card, then Amazon Pay, Cash App Pay. Now we need a button. So I'm just going to paste the code. I will also add a loading state in the checkout page component, and I'll pass it to the checkout form. Now we have an error, disable Stripe. So we need to use a hook called use Stripe in the checkout form. This is also coming from React Stripe. And now we have a pay now button. For now, this pay now button will not do anything. We need to add event listener. So let's create the handle submit function. Also, we need to use the use elements hook. If Stripe or elements isn't loaded, we don't want to do anything. After that, we're going to set the loading state to true. Now we can confirm the payment using the confirm payment function from Stripe. So Stripe dot confirm payment. This Stripe instance is actually coming from the hook. And then in the confirm payment, we need to pass an object. We need to pass elements. Then we can specify confirm params. Here we can also specify return URL. This return URL will redirect the user once the payment is done. So you can redirect to the home page, or you can redirect them to any other page you want. Now let's get the error and just console log the error. And then just set the loading state to false. So this should work. So let's use card. And if I just submit without adding any details, you see we have this validations out of the box. And let's add some details. Let's just pay now. And now we are redirected to the completion page with more query parameters like payment intent, client secret, etc. So this is how you can use Stripe web elements. Now, if you want to use Google Pay or Apple Pay in your checkout page, or if you're using Stripe hosted checkout page, that's pretty easy to do. So just go to the Stripe dashboard and go to your sandbox or project. Then go to settings, I guess. And then payments, payment methods. You can active Apple Pay, Google Pay just by clicking on this turn on button. Then you should see Google Pay or Apple Pay in your checkout page. But you need to meet some requirements in order to have Apple Pay or Google Pay. For example, you need to have HTTPS instead of HTTP. If you want to get HTTPS on localhost, that's pretty easy to do with Next.js. Just go to package.json and then just go to your dev script and then add a flag dash experimental, then HTTPS. Now I will close the dev server and run npm run dev. So it will generate self-signed certificates. And now I can just go to HTTPS, then localhost 3000. And now I'm using HTTPS instead of HTTP. Now I still don't see Apple Pay or Google Pay, and there are several reasons for that. Apple Pay isn't available in my country, and Google Pay is also not widely available. So this could be one reason. Another reason could be I'm using Brave, even though it's a Chrome-based browser, but it's still not Chrome. So it could be one reason. If you don't see Apple Pay, I believe it is only available on Safari browser and on iOS devices. Then you can also make sure that you have a card saved in your Google Wallet. Then another thing you can do in Google Chrome, you can search for this option, allow sites to check if you have payment method saved, enable it, and also make sure you're not using incognito mode. So if you meet these requirements, you should see Google Pay and Apple Pay. Now let's talk about customization like styling. For that, you need to use Stripe Elements Appearance API. You can check the documentation. You just need to go to Stripe dashboard. So not Stripe dashboard, you just need to go to Stripe documentation. Just search for Elements Appearance API. So Stripe comes in three pre-built themes. First one is the Stripe theme, then the night theme, and then the flat theme. And obviously you can customize the themes from the pre-built themes, as you can see on the demo. The way you do it is pretty simple. First, you can just specify the theme, and then you can change variables. Stripe comes in predefined variables. For example, color primary for these colors, then color background, color text, then icon colors, color text secondary, border radius. You can check the reference over here, commonly used variables, and there are some less commonly used variables like font size excel, font line height, etc. You set them inside this appearance object inside variables. Then you can also define rules. The rules option is map of CSS like selectors to CSS properties. In the rules object, you can see that the property names are actually CSS class names like tab hover with the hover state, then tab selected, this is CSS class, then input invalid, etc. To find the class names, you need to go to the individual elements like tabs. You have tab icon, then tab class, tab label. Then for checkbox, you have checkbox label. Then for drop down item, etc. You can see the documentation, or you can just inspect the elements. And as you can see on the input, if you just see the class names, it has this input class name, then input text right, etc. So just check the documentation. Then some other things you need to remember. The selector for a rule can target any public class names in the element, as well as the supported states, pseudo classes, pseudo elements. Then you have some state CSS class names like -- invalid, -- empty, etc. Not every element or every tag supports every state class names. For example, the input element will support the invalid class state, but the tab variable won't support that. And you can also see the allow list of CSS properties. So only these CSS properties can be editable, can be customized. And also you see that which class names will support these properties. So let's see one example. I have a file called appearance.js. This is an appearance object. I've also added the js comment for having IntelliSense. So we have specified the theme and then variables, and we have rules. Rules is optional, obviously. We have customized the input class name. We have added some shadow, invalid state, label, etc. To add this appearance object, we need to go to the checkout form. In the elements, we need to add appearance, and the styles are changed. You might not notice it, but let's just change some colors. For example, change the primary color to the red color. And the primary color is now red. I can also change the padding to, let's say, 7.75 rem to go extreme. And the padding is now huge. I'll put it back to normal. So that's about it. This is how you can use Stripe Web Elements in your Next.js app to create your own custom checkout page. In the next video, we're going to learn about Stripe webhooks. It is really important. So make sure you subscribe and press the bell icon so that you don't miss the video. All right, so goodbye.